Does your project ever feel like a bit of an elephant? Big, cumbersome, unwieldy, and maybe unmovable? Desmond Tutu once wisely said there's only one way to eat an elephant, and that's one bite at a time. Now, nearly everything that seems daunting, overwhelming, and even impossible can be accomplished gradually just by taking on a little bit at a time. And that is your Project Champ. So keep listening to today's podcast to discover how you can reduce complexity and confusion on your projects by breaking down the project into bite-sized pieces that everybody can understand. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ben Aston, founder of The Digital Project Manager. Welcome to the DPM podcast. We're on a mission to help project managers succeed, to help people who manage projects deliver better. We're here to help you take your project game to the next level. Check out thedigitalprojectmanager.com to learn about our training and resources we offer through membership. This podcast is brought to you by Clarizen, the leader in enterprise project and portfolio management software. Visit clarizen.com to learn more. Today, I'm joined by Emily Luijbregts. You can check her out at mthepm.com. Now, Emily is a project manager at Siemens and has worked in the past as a PM for Mazda, BDO, and been on the PMI's Community Champions Advisory Group. So she's got stacks of interesting experience. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Hi there. Thank you very much for having me.
And how did I do with your surname there? Give
Wonderful.
Me a rating.
Oh, 10 out of 10. That was actually really good.
Oh, yes. Nailed it. So, I mean, we were just chatting before the show started rolling there, but tell us what's new for you in terms of, we were talking about juggling, being full-time parent and a full-time employee in the midst of Corona. How's that working out for you?
How is it working out? How is it not working out? It is crazy, you know. I think, I'm doing what I consider to be 2 or 3 full-time jobs right now. I mean, I'm trying to manage projects, support teams, and then also, support my children and trying to, be a teacher and educate them. It's just, it's an impossible task. And I feel like many other project managers and many other people are feeling right now. I feel like I'm failing because, I can't win for doing right. I spend time on my projects, which means my kids, are sitting there going, Mummy, I need some help. Mummy, what about this? Mummy, play with me. Or then on the other time, I spend time with my kids and then my projects are going, Emily, what's going on? Emily, we've got this. Emily, we've got that. So, you just can't win. So I'm just trying to keep everything rolling along without kind of having too many fires and without kind of, burning myself out by working too many hours, once the kids have gone to sleep.
Yeah. So have you found anything that is working well in your new setup in terms of like how you've been able to schedule your work or manage your work or communicate with people? Is there any part of this that is working yet?
Yeah. Do you know what? It's like, I've been working virtually. So I've done a lot of virtual projects. So I'm used to working virtually. I'm used to working with virtual teams, but I am now working with people that are connecting on a virtual landscape for the first time. So, like they're turning on their webcast and you see them picking their nose or you see them, kind of wondering, hello, can you hear me? Is anyone there? And, really kind of struggling to kind of get their technology to work. So I think that's also been one of the things for me that I've really benefited from because I haven't had to have a big learning curve on, how to use virtual setups. What is the best microphone to use? How to make sure that you're being understood and, that you're using the right time zones. Because, now, because my day is, quite split up into different chunks, I try to use that to my advantage. So I chase the sun quite a bit. I start work, before the kids have got up and I really start on some emails, make sure that's done, give them breakfast, get them started on things. And then I go back to work for a bit. And then I'm kind of trying to utilize my concentration. So I'm splitting everything into like 30-minute, 1-hour chunks. And trying to kind of get as much done work-wise and then taking a break, sorting the kids out, making sure they're okay, going back to work, and then actually stopping for lunch, which is really nice because then I actually get to, see my kids and really kind of play with them and really kind of enjoy myself, which is quite nice because it enables me to focus more. And I do find that when I go back to my work, I'm a lot more focused. So I'm now not thinking, what have I got to do now? Oh, I better go and check this. It's, this is my list. Tack, 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 tack. Get it done.
So for someone who's beginning maybe in the next few weeks to have to begin to juggle this, what would your top tips be for someone who's, starting to work remotely or trying to manage teams remotely for the first time? What are the things that you find kind of most effective with your kind of remote setup, and how you manage teams in different time zones and things like that? What are the tips? What are the things that work for you?
Yeah. So one of the things is I want to try and I make sure my planning's up to point. So at the end of every day, I make sure I've got my task list for the next day. So what I've got to achieve, what I've got to get done. Right. I also rely on, I use timeanddate.com, but whatever kind of virtual like Calendly or whatever that has like a virtual scheduling, so that then you can kind of get everything in each location. And the problem at the moment is that Europe is not yet in daylight savings, whereas the US is. So I know that there has been a lot of confusion this week and last week when the US had moved over to kind of say, the meeting's going to be at 4:00. Oh, no, wait, it's 3:00. Oh, wait, we've got a conflict. That kind of thing can be really, really confusing. So make sure you have, technology on your side and make sure that you have everything kind of ready and set up. I'm really lucky that my husband is a technology freak and a technology geek. So I have a great setup at home with, my standing table, with a good microphone, with a good webcam that I can then connect with my teams. And we have a really good internet setup. So I don't have to worry about, bandwidth problems or anything like that. So that's also one thing, if you can encourage your company to pay for this, make sure you have a good monitor, make sure that you've got everything set up so that you are not kind of scrambling or being forced to react, and that you've got a good setup to be able to move forward with.
Yeah, I think that's solid advice. And I think I hear that so many times from people who do work remotely, like your setup is really important. And I think we've actually just made the transition as DPM team into all working remotely. And for the first few days, everyone was kind of getting by with not having their extra monitors, not having their desks. But then I just said to the team, guys, we could be in this for a while. So like, make yourself comfortable, get your desk. Let's get the desks from the office. Let's get the monitors. It's so important that we set ourselves up properly, like to succeed, rather than thinking, hey, we can be just as productive as we normally are, sitting with the laptops on our lap, kind of squashed in a corner, and not with no real desk or whatever. So the setup is one thing that you can control. So, so it's worth investing in, because you could be in that position for a long time. So I think that's great advice. But tell us, obviously you've got a couple of projects. One is being teacher, and then there's being mum and being project manager as well. But in terms of the project side of things and the work that you're doing with Siemens, can you tell us a bit about the kind of projects that you work on?
Oh, yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm doing a real mix between process improvements and software implementation. So software implementation is where we go and implement our solution at clients. And that's kind of really interesting because I love working with clients and I love working with, different teams that we get to experience. And then also I'm really lucky within Siemens that we do have the opportunity of being able to do, our interest projects. So I'm really interested in process improvements and coaching people to be, better project managers or better leaders. So I'm really lucky that they give me the opportunity to be able to work on those sort of projects as well.
It's cool that that's kind of laid out as an opportunity and project for you. So can you tell us a bit about the kind of coaching that you're doing with the team?
Yeah, so it kind of started out actually really informally. So colleagues would approach me and say, I'm struggling with this. Could you please help me? Or, I know that you have experience in, in leadership or in managing virtual or remote teams. Can you please give me some advice? And that's kind of where it kind of stemmed from. And it's kind of it's really been a love of mine, because I love being able to help and coach people and being able to support them, become better. And it really gives me a lot of motivation to be able to then see my colleagues develop. And I really love that.
Yeah, that's cool. And you touched on their like process improvements as well. And so I'm curious if you can kind of explain, because I think probably what you do in terms of these IT software implementation projects, can you kind of describe a typical project that you run, and then lay on top of that kind of the process improvements that you try and bring into that?
Oh, where to actually begin? The thing is, I try to live a Kaizen approach. So Kaizen is Japanese for constant improvement. So within that, every project that I do, I look for where we can improve a process. So either with internal teams or how we work together. And then I like to take that back to my PM team within Siemens and say, you know what, this is something that has worked for me. Could this maybe work for you guys as well? And that's why we like to try and see, with every project we do, how can we make it better? How can we improve what we do so that then when we go to a next client, we can be faster, slicker, more efficient, etc. And, we do have a lot of learning and lessons learned in place that really do support us in that, so that then we have a repository that we can, go to and we can use, that's really, really also very, very helpful for us.
And so these kind of implementation projects that you're doing, so Siemens PLM, can you tell us about that tool and what that implementation looks like? Is it that you go to the client's office, stick it on a server, and then onboard people on how to use it? Is that a gross oversimplification?
Well, it really depends, because we have different products. That's the thing. So there are many, many different products that we have, and it depends on the client and depends on the solution. So it all depends whether, what solution they're looking for. And also, I have to be quite sensitive with what I say now, because I'm also under confidentiality. So there are certain things that with regards to, how we process and the projects, that we have to be quite careful of mentioning. But we do have a large array of products. So, it's, we've got NX, Solid Edge, we've got all these different kind of areas that can support a company's ability to be able to do their work. And that's where the whole PLM solution comes in. But the thing is, and this is why I'm trying to be sensitive with what I say, is I work in such a small area of PLM that there is so much more around it, that if I try and oversimplify it to say, well, this is what I do and this is the entirety of PLM, you're going to think, you get one view of it, where actually it is an entire massive beast almost. So that's why I'm just saying, be a little bit careful, because the area that I work in is quite niche. And that's why it's very, I try and just kind of keep it, simplified.
Yeah. And so, you talk about your Kaizen approach and, trying to constantly kind of optimize your workflows and processes. So with these implementations, what are the most typical challenges that you deal with, or are they so varied that there's nothing typical about them?
Oh, it can be a bit of both. One thing that I often struggle with is stakeholder management, because when you go obviously to different clients and to different organizations, you are stepping into things that you may not even realize as yet. So, there could be politics that you may even not understand for, why someone is behaving in such a way. So I think the biggest thing for me always is going to be stakeholder management, especially when you're working with external customers and external clients, because that is really the toughest thing for me. It's making sure that when I go in, I'm not coming into, what I would describe as, a boiling pot of water that I'm putting my foot in, that I can already make sure that I understand what's going on. I understand, what stakeholders are involved. Have we got all the stakeholders, aware, and kind of moving forward from that, because that's going to be the most, important thing, when you get started in an organization or when you go in as a consultant.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, stakeholders are always a tricky one, especially when you're in the kind of role that you're doing, where you're constantly having to deal with new ones. You're where you can develop relationships over time. I think things get easier eventually, but where you're constantly shifting onto new ones and trying to understand different people's motivations and the power structures at play, and who's really in charge, who thinks they're in charge, all those kind of things, they can be difficult to deal with. Exactly. So talk to me about, you're implementing software, but what is in your personal PM toolkit for managing projects?
I like to think it's my communication skills. I like to make sure that I like to think I can read a room. So I like to make sure if I go into clients or whatever, I read the circumstances that we're going into, I look at what's going on, and then I can lead a team. So one of the things that I sell myself on is my ability to be able to build a team and lead a team. And it's not just as simple as kind of doing a team building exercise or, putting everyone together in one room. It's really making sure people can work together successfully, but also to be able to then support the team wherever they need it to be able to become a success. And, of course, plenty of sticky tape and Post-it notes to make sure that everyone's, working as they need to be.
Nice. And in terms of, sticky notes and tape and that kind of thing, is there anything else that you've found recently that's making your life awesome? Maybe in terms of remote PMing, or just the way that you manage your projects using software or something else. Is there anything that you've found recently that everyone should know about that's making PMing better?
Yeah, well, I think for me at the moment, it is, this is going to sound awful, but I think it's the positive things that may be coming and the changing working environment that we have as a result of the coronavirus. I think the coronavirus has exposed a great weakness that we have in a lot of our working processes and how we perform and work. And this has been so critical for me. So one of the other arms of what I do is, yes, I work for Siemens, but I'm also a volunteer. So I often support project managers with coaching, and they come to me for support. And I also kind of help them occasionally leading projects on a volunteer basis. And one of the things that I have seen in the past, really 3, 4, 5 weeks, has been just how people have struggled to adjust to remote work, but also how they are coming to terms with working in an isolated environment. So social isolation, making sure that they are connecting with their teams. And one of the biggest things I've been supporting at the moment is one project manager that has been struggling because they can't connect with their team. They are all co-located. They've been in the same location, but now because of Corona, they're being forced to work remotely. And he said, I just can't connect with them. I can see them on the screen. I can see them on Microsoft Teams, but you know what? I don't care, I don't get the feeling that they're working. I don't get the feeling that I can trust them trust them again. And, I think that this has given us the opportunity to be able to then help people not only develop their skills for remote working, but also to help and show organizations the benefits and the efficiencies that can be given when people are able to work remote. Because that's also been a really kind of stark thing for me, my friends and my colleagues, is how many of them feel like they must go to an office, like they must work in one location. Whereas the best thing about project management and some of the projects is you can work virtually, you can work remotely and still be a success. And I think that's what a couple of people, really struggle to kind of get their head around, that this could actually be a successful endeavor to go on. And I really do hope that organizations look at the benefits that have come from, their teams working remotely, work-life balance, and, build on that moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know that, again, talking about the DPM team and how we have now become dispersed, I think there are kind of growing pains, as it were, if you're used to working together in the same room or in the same office, as soon as you start having to be more thoughtful about communication, things can, it's tricky, right? You can't just turn around and just distract someone and ask them to answer your question. You have to think, okay, how am I going to communicate? What's the best way of communicating this? What's the most efficient way? And I think, retraining ourselves to kind of optimize those communication channels and methods, I think is really important. Because I think what I found with my team is that, okay, so everyone, we had Slack, and so everyone now defaults to having a Slack conversation because it was it's a channel that we already had, but then they're having communications that really should be conversations, and that would work better as a quick video chat or something, but people are used just to typing. And so I think we kind of very quickly, if we're not careful, start adopting bad habits in terms of remote working where things do become more inefficient. So I think it's really worth taking that step back and thinking, okay, as a team, working out your communications plan, what are the rhythms going to be? How are we going to communicate to others? What methods are we going to use to communicate what kind of message? If it's kind of asynchronous communication, or if there's synchronicity in it, let's have a conversation live using video so we feel that connection. And I think it's worth thinking about as we're developing our kind of remote toolkit and how we begin to work independently in isolation of one another, so that we can be efficient in the way that we work. So I think that's solid advice. And let's move on now to talk about your post that is all about work breakdown structure, which again is in a way a communications tool. It's a tool that helps us understand what exactly is going to be delivered on a project and how it kind of fits together. But for anyone who hasn't read your post yet on work breakdown structure, can you tell us what it's all about?
Well, I would say go and read it. Come on, what are you waiting for? But really, the article is basically everything that you need to know about, what a work breakdown structure is, how to make a good quality one, why does it matter, and everything around, what a WBS is. Because the one thing that I see, especially when I've been coaching junior project managers, is they may have read something online like, oh, I think I know what this Gantt chart is, but they don't actually understand it. They don't understand what makes it up. Why do you put something in one place that you don't in another? How can you get people aligned? Why do you need to, put named resources rather than departments? And that's why I wanted to create an article and a post that would really clear it all out and would really show people, this is what it is, break it down into real baby steps. This is what it is, this is what you need to know, and this is why it is important for you. Because then, if you are a junior project manager and, you're coming in and you maybe don't want to ask because you feel a bit silly, or maybe you don't want to ask because, you don't want to look like you're, an amateur, then, this article can really help you, really make a good foundation and a good basis for your project.
Great. And so in terms of understanding like the basics then of work breakdown structure, it is a breakdown of the work. It's how we think about the work, how we break it down into component pieces, and then the structure of the work as well. So it kind of shows the hierarchy of what that work looks like, kind of in a puzzle, how the pieces fit together to form the whole. And it shows us different kind of levels of the work and how the components relate to one another that way.
Yeah.
But in terms of using this work breakdown structure, I've got to be honest, as a PM, it's not something I use. So I'm curious as to your kind of use case for the work breakdown structure. Personally, I tend to just roll straight into creating a Gantt chart. So talk me through the kind of the pros and cons of Gantt chart, work breakdown structure, how those two things relate to one another, and kind of how and why it's useful.
Do you know, I will answer this, but I really want to turn it back for why do you go straight into a Gantt chart? Why don't you try and kind of, think it out, do a proper thought process before? And the reason I ask that is because if you start out, looking at the inputs for a work breakdown structure, looking at the documents that kind of go into it, having that understanding of the tasks, the activities that you're going to be doing, and then looking at potentially also the resource and the utilization of that. Why do you already start with a Gantt chart? Why don't you kind of go back? Is it because you already think you know what's going to be happening? Or what is your understanding there?
I guess it comes down to, it comes down to, I guess, the complexity for me. I mean, there's two ways of doing a work breakdown structure, right? It can be deliverables based, or it can be activities based. So deliverables where we're like looking at the deliverables, trying to break down those deliverables into the component pieces so that we can understand, okay, when we're saying we're going to deliver X, this is what we mean. It has these two things make X, and these three other things make up that component. So it's breaking down the deliverables where the deliverables are complex or ambiguous, to provide clarity for everybody. These are the things. This is what the work breakdown looks like, and this is how it's structured. I guess the other way is more activities based, and breaking down those activities into the component pieces, or the process. And so for me, in my Gantt chart, I'm combining those two things together. So I think I would say in the projects that I typically work with, the deliverables are less ambiguous, in terms of, hey, if I'm saying we're going to deliver a template, then a template is a template, and I don't really need to break it down into the deliverables much further, and the activities that go into that are quite predictable. So maybe it's about predictability. I don't know. Do you use more deliverables or activities based?
Yeah, for me, it's a real mixture. So in my project, I tend to use more activities, with the core focus being on the deliverables at the end. But what I have seen, and, the reason that I created the template that I did, and also how I phrased it, is because in the projects that I have seen, so not necessarily my projects, but the ones of peers and in different organizations, it has been a real mix between deliverables and activities and, the milestones which are there to kind of really give a good overview of, what makes, a solid work breakdown structure. Because the thing is, and also what I have seen is, a Gantt chart and a work breakdown structure, they are really unique to a project manager. So what my one looks like and what your one looks like may be completely different depending on where you put the emphasis or where I put the emphasis. And, that's why I've tried to also make it very clear for, what are the necessary inputs and outputs that you need. And then you can always do some personalization yourself if you want to put more of a heavy basis on activities or things like that. But then I also wanted to also make sure that everyone was very much aware of what not to do. Try not to put things in too much detail, or, not go into enough detail. So to find that nice balance. And I think that's also one thing that you learn being a project manager is what is that level of detail for you and your organization to make the best work breakdown structure for your projects as well.
And so, let's talk about how you use that work breakdown structure, because obviously it's a tool that we use to create clarity around how the project kind of all fits together. And I think that's what we're definitely aligned on. These are the component pieces. This is what has to happen in order for the project to be a success. So it doesn't show the schedule as much as how the component pieces of it. And so how do you use that work breakdown structure? Because I know with a Gantt chart, which is obviously the project schedule, it can show the resources, the different tasks and durations, dependencies and critical path. Yeah. It shows how the flow of the project works. Whereas the work breakdown structure is kind of another slice of a different way of looking at the project. So how do you use the Gantt chart and the work breakdown structure? in terms of a communications tool with the stakeholder in the team? How are you playing with those two documents?
Yeah. So for me, one thing that I like to try and make sure of is that whenever I talk to stakeholders and whenever I talk to my team, I use which document is going to be the best reflection or the best use for them. So for example, if I show my sponsor the very, very detailed work breakdown structure, they're going to look at it and go, what? Whereas my team are going to really want that level of detail and going to really want to understand, every single part of it. So I try and look at, whichever stakeholder that I'm approaching, what document is going to be the best view for them. And also when you do create a work breakdown structure, making it as easy for you to update, but also as easy for you to create as many different views as possible. So, I like to kind of mix between either Excel or Project. I'm kind of easy on which one and which software I use. But I also like to try and make sure that I can amend and detail whatever I need to for which stakeholder. So, if it's one that needs more of a high level or whichever needs a detailed, I can do that. Now, what I like to try and do, and the way I run my projects, is I base all of my updates based upon these documents. So, when I'm talking to teams about, where are we on specific tasks or ownerships, I'm basing it on what is in this document. I'm not trying to have 3 or 4 different meetings. I update the one single document, and that becomes the core basis of our project. And having that 1 or 2 documents really kind of saves me time. And that's the main thing you want as a project manager. You want to be able just to make sure that you are utilizing your time as effectively as possible. And that's why I also try to make sure that, I call it the Bible. If my work breakdown structure, if my Gantt chart says this and you're saying something different, we need to have a discussion about that. We need to see why and where this different lies, and what is going to be the best thing moving forward. Do I need to amend my documents, or is this something where you need to go back and adjust either what you're doing or the activities that have been listed? So for me, it is the basis of every single meeting that I go into with relation to the project. And it's also a communication tool for every single stakeholder and project team member that I have in my projects.
Yeah. And so in terms of keeping it up to date, this is something along with your status report and your Gantt chart, you're updating throughout the project.
Yeah. So what I like to do is I try and schedule times, either it depends on obviously the duration of the project here. So I try to schedule maybe twice a week to be able to go into detail to make sure that all of my project artifacts are up to date. Because I know that, if you don't do this, it can lead to problems and, issues with the documents not being up to date. And that's where it all goes wrong. And this is also why, if you are updating these documents so regularly, you need to make sure that it's not cumbersome. So you need to, verify the level of detail that you have so that, you have enough detail in your plan for you to be able to talk to your project team, but you also need it not to be so cumbersome that you're tracking them on, a 30-minute task where it takes longer for you to write it in, get an update and get it done than it does for them to actually complete the task. So yeah. It's really important to find that level of balance in your documentation. Yeah.
And so, and where you see things falling apart, where does, for someone who's new to work breakdown structures, who's reading your article and thinking, okay, yeah, I can do this. Where does the work breakdown structure typically fall apart for you? Like, where do things go wrong? Is it in that sizing of tasks or activities, or is it in something else?
Normally it is in the sizing of activities. But the one thing that I have actually seen, quite a few times is their inputs are wrong. So they're basing their entire project on maybe incomplete artifacts. So maybe when they're looking at creating the work breakdown structure and they realize that they don't actually have several of the inputs that they may need to be able to create it properly. And they go forward with assumptions. And I have a funny thing which I kind of say in my workshops, and I say assumptions make asses out of you and me because of the ass UME. So if you make an assumption, you really are just, setting yourself up to fail. So one thing that I often see is either they are basing it on maybe incomplete or not sufficient data, or they're trying to be too detailed in what they're asking. So, they're either trying to get an update for a task that took 5 minutes, or they're trying and see how detailed they can make a project plan. Now, I remember in my very early days, I made this mistake. I think it was a 1,200 line project plan. And I thought I was the bee's knees. Everything is so detailed. I've got this fantastic plan. It shows everything. I've got my inputs. I've got my outputs. I've got my resources. How many times do you think I managed to update it properly? Not a lot.
Yeah.
So that's why, I learned the hard way, because I tried to, make it as detailed as physically possible. But then when you get into the execution of your project and, you're running around, you've got things to do. The last thing that you want to be doing is spending time on updating tasks when, it's already done, or, you can't necessarily get the input from the team member at the time. So it's just, you have to learn from your own experience, but also learn from, my failures, because I don't want anyone else to make the same mistakes that I've done.
Well, that's very kind of you. And so, yeah, if you are thinking about, I think this is the work breakdown structure is a great tool to use if you find that in your projects there is confusion around maybe how the project is going to work, the activities that are going to go into it, the outputs that are going to come out of it. It's great if you need to create clarity on the project, and I think this can be a really useful tool if you find your projects are a bit wishy-washy. The work breakdown structure is a great way of clarifying what comes out of the end of this. We've got this project life cycle. The project's born, it happens, and then it ends, and then we're left with these artifacts, these deliverables, and the work breakdown structure gives us clarity on what those things will be. So if you find that you're in a situation where people are getting confused, really think about a work breakdown structure and how that could help you as a communications tool for your project. You might find that it's super useful. So check it out on the digitalprojectmanager.com. But before we go, for someone who's kind of half listening in the car, what would be your tip? What would be the one thing that you would say to someone who's trying to do a work breakdown structure for the first time, and they're thinking, "Hey, I've read the post. I kind of get what it's about. But for you, like, what's the one thing to kind of keep in mind or remember for someone who's new to work breakdown structures and is beginning to find the whole thing overwhelming as they're just creating this massive thing? What's the one piece of advice you'd give?
Just break it down into manageable chunks. Don't try and make it too cumbersome, but also don't try and leave it too high. Look at your overall project and make sure that whatever you're making is going to be realistic for you to be able to update, but also is going to be in enough level of detail that you're going to be able to actually have discussions on this. And just like you said, you need to be able to see the overview, to be able to see if there are any weaknesses or any gaps that you need to be filling before you get into, full-length project planning. Because the work breakdown structure can be a great example and an exercise to be able to perform this.
Yeah, I think that's really solid advice. And my view on this is that, look at the big picture. The work breakdown structure is all about the big picture. And I think it can be tempting to go really deep into one component. Like we start at the beginning of the project, we go really, really deep, and then we start getting bored, and then we, don't go to the same depth. So I think breadth is a great place to start, and then begin to add depth would be my advice. So that you get that big full picture of what the work breakdown looks like, and then you can appropriately go into depth on the bits that need more clarification or detail. But Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great having you with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I wonder what you listeners think. What are your hacks, tips, and tricks for work breakdown structures? Do you use them or not? How do you use them with Gantt charts? Let us know in the comments below. Let us know what works and what doesn't work. We'd love to hear your fail stories or wins about work breakdown structure. And if you want to learn more and get ahead in your work, come and join our tribe with DPM membership. Head to thedigitalprojectmanager.com/membership and get access to our Slack team, templates, workshops, masterminds, office hours, ebooks, and more. And if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and take a couple of minutes to leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. We love our fans, and please don't ruin our magical 5-star rating. But until next time, thanks for listening.